Now, what would seem to me the characteristics of today's Danish performing arts? Well, I'd like to say a few words first about how they seem to be organized from my point of view, and then look a bit at what comes out of how it's all working. Now, like everything in Denmark, what I've noticed with theatres is that it is small scale. We have one big exception, which is the Royal National Theatre in Copenhagen, which is, of course, a huge institution, actually, and combining drama, opera, ballet, and an orchestra. But apart from that, all producing entities seem to be fairly small scale or medium scale. Like we have the publicly funded theatre institutions in all the big cities like Aarhus, Aalborg, Odense, and indeed in Copenhagen. Essentially, they rely on national funding. And apart from them, there are a number of small and medium-sized theatre and dance companies that have funding from cities and from their regions. And what I've noticed as being one common factor to all of these smaller and medium-sized theatres and dance companies is that their close relation to their audiences. And I'll come back to that later, because I think it's an essential feature of the way that the Danish performing arts are actually created and formed. Apart from the institutions I just mentioned, there is in Denmark a myriad of small production companies and collectives of artists. And most of them don't have their own permanent space. And that, I would say, is another typical feature. And this is also where things get really interesting, and actually a bit different to what I see in Sweden, where even the smaller independent companies very often have their own venues, which creates a kind of a more static way of being in the theatre landscape. But I'll come back also to this. Because not having your own space obviously means that you have to collaborate. And the medium-sized institutions are in fact obliged to do the same. They must organize co-productions with the independent companies. They must invite them for guest performances and residencies. And I think this creates a very interesting exchange of competencies between the smaller and the bigger, and those with resources and those who actually don't have quite a lot. So in this showcase, we have examples that I know of, like the Hotel Pro Forma, who have for many years co-produced projects together with large arts institutions, opera houses, theatres, and other kinds of organizations across Denmark and indeed across the world. We have someone like Tue Bjerring and his Fix and Foxy company, who have recently made a project in co-production with the Aalborg Theatre. And we can also see here indeed the Danish Dance Theatre company, which has teamed up since a certain time with the Royal National Ballet. So all of these are interesting examples of how this works. Not having your own space obviously means that you're thinking always in terms of moving around with your productions and making touring. And that I find is also almost everything I see in festivals like the Copenhagen Stage seem to be productions that could very easily be staged and played and adapted to really any other country, and I think so. There's really built into the system, there is a move towards the international and the mobility. I would say that the CPH, the Copenhagen Stage Festival and the showcase every year is a wonderful expression of this collaborative culture within the Danish performing arts. I mean, that's the fact that this festival always presents a mix of drama, dance, music, theatre, contemporary circus, interactive performances. All of this is, in my view, typical of the non-hierarchical diversity of the Danish performing arts. If you see me looking this way all the time, it's because I have this paper to remind me of what I have to say to you. So I'm sorry if I look a bit silly that way, but that's how it is. Now, this goes hand in hand with another characteristic that I was mentioning before, which is the close relations between the performers and their audiences. I've always found that Danes seem to go to the theatre mainly to get together, to feel a community. And they have very strong bonds with the artists on stage. Now, in the national institutions, you will see classical works and new drama. But I have this feeling that audience expect you not to get too pretentious and not too intellectual. That there should be this sort of closeness and communication with the spectators. And especially if things get complicated on stage, then the audiences will expect the performers to actually guide them into the difficulties and say, okay, it's not so dangerous, we'll get through this together. And I think this touches a bit upon what the word Karen was using just before, talking about the connection, we're connected all the time. And I think that's a very important thing. In Sweden, it's not at all like that, actually. I think we are much more, we come to the theatre and expect to get very much wiser, and we pretend to get wiser, actually, even if we don't. And it's more like a serious business in Sweden, I would say. And this doesn't mean to say that it's not serious in Denmark, but the expressions are lighter. And so what we have is a lot of humor and playfulness and often a touch of absurdism, which we will also see in the program of these days. I've been looking through here, like we have the Gunilla Lind, we have Annika Lewis with Cassandra Productions, and indeed Christian Ingemarsson. They're all examples of these artists who work with this playful, a slightly absurdist touch to their work. Now, the fact that so many groups don't have their fixed abode or their fixed venues, and actually orient their work towards sharing experiences with the audience, I find that this is actually a fantastic condition for making performance in times of Corona crisis, or indeed any other crisis. Because I would say that there's a readiness to work with smaller groups of audiences, like the typical now we may be limited to 10 people in the audience. Wonderful. So the performers will work with 10 people at the time. And you have these specific, site-specific performance installations. There are dance walks, walking through cities. We have poetic enigmas to solve as participants in these mise en scène. You connect a few people around a coffee table and start telling stories. Or you have these wonderful one-to-one shows. In this showcase also we have this thing. I was sent a letter from the group Recoil with some living algae, and I'm thrilled about it. I'm so careful with them, and I'm just waiting to see what will happen to them tomorrow in the show. So all of these things connect us physically also and involve us as spectators physically in the performances. And I think all of this is perfectly adaptable to anywhere in the world. So in fact, to resume, the small scale, the mobility, the shared artistic explorations, all these factors, I would say, are conducive to a rich diversity of expressions. And I think these may prove very interesting as starting points for the performing arts in Corona times, and hopefully very soon post-Corona times. So Thank you very much for your attention.